Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode in my series on the Witcher lore. Whether this be my first video you're watching or not, I bid you all the warmest of welcomes, and today we're going to be looking over Novigrad. So to understand what type of place Novigrad is, I'm going to explain exactly how and when the city began to develop to the point where it is now. The current land where resides the Northern Kingdoms has in actual fact been under the control of humans for only around 850 years, which is an interesting fact because humans have been around since the conjunction of the spheres for about 1,500 years, give or take a few. They never started truly expanding until 760 when they sailed ships and made landfall in the Pontar Delta at the mouth of the Uraga. The Uraga being the largest river in the Northern Kingdoms and the Pontar Delta being basically the part just before where it opens up from the river into the ocean. This event in history and the arrival of humans has been called the First Landing or the Landing of the Exiles. No one really knows who humans were or who they encountered upon arrival or who even led them, but the only thing that is really known is that there was a man amongst them called Jan Becker who was one of the very first humans to master magic, or as they called it back then, the Force, because they didn't have a better word for it. Being able to harness this power gave the humans a weapon that very few had and was very possibly one of the biggest reasons they managed to climb to have such influence and providence over others. Now, all of this relates back to the creation of Novigrad because when those humans arrived, it was in fact a small elven settlement which had apparently been left abandoned, meaning that the people who arrived there didn't actually build Novigrad from scratch, they in fact built off of what was left of the ruins, so it's kind of an interesting fact because I had no idea and I doubt many people did. Once they had settled there, it became the capital to a new country created by the humans under the rule of King Sambuk, the ancestor to the first king of Redania. In the 11th century, a conflict took place called the 7 Years' War. The reigning king at the time, Vestibor the Proud, lost Novigrad to Temeria during that war. The capital of Redania was then moved, and Novigrad became a Temerian city for a very long period of time. The situation then changed during the reign of Vestivor's grandson Radovid III, also known as Radovid the Bold. After long negotiations, a compromise was reached and the city was acclaimed as a free city, meaning it stood by itself as a city-state and was not subject to the rule of the kingdom. Although Redanian kings are officially recognised as kings of Temeria and Novigrad, real authority is vested in the hierarch elected by the Council of Electors, and the hierarch is basically the man who controls the city, a bit like a mayor or what is the equivalent of the king or the prime minister of a country, but instead it's just for a single city. And in Novigrad's situation, the current hierarch is called Sirius Engelkind Hemelfart. The city stands at the northern shore of the Pontar and northwest of Oxenfurt, and obviously is on the borders of Velen. The name itself, interestingly enough, means new city or new castle in various Slavic languages, which is another thing that some people might not have known, but it's an interesting fact as well, because the city of Novigrad was supposedly based off of what medieval Amsterdam would have been like, so there's a lot of different influences taken from different parts of the world. It is one of the biggest ports on the continent and the largest city in the north with a population of about 30,000 or so. Those inhabitants are unusually colourful groups of both permanent residents and those in the town on long and short-term visits, often many being traders and sailors stopping there to sell their wares and move on to the next port or resupply on a long journey. And speaking of trade, it is one of the wealthiest cities as well due to the massive influx of those bringing in new people and often the newest things from around the continent. They also have their own currency known as Novigradian crowns, which can be exchanged at the various banks. If ever anyone wants to find anything, they will undoubtedly find it in Novigrad, which includes the shady underground of drug dealers and sellers of illegal or stolen items, which is being near impossible to control in such a place of such a size. The actual city, unlike many other free cities, does strangely enough not have its own army. Instead, they have the thick walls that surround the city, said to be impregnable and also built by the architects at Oxenfurt, which is one of the best academies around, rivaling that of even the Nilfgaardians. They also have a secret service, the Temple Guard, the Temple Fleet, and of course the Eternal Fire. which leads us on to the religion of the city because it plays a very big part in Novigrad. The cult of the Eternal Fire is one that is not solely connected to Novigrad but has incredible influence amongst the city and her inhabitants. The cult's greatest temple is the Novigradian Grand Church, which is led and controlled by a chosen member that is selected by the Council of the Electors, who are also the same people who select the ruler of the city. The church alone has 3 military arms: the Order of the Flaming Rose, Witch Hunters, and Temple Guards. So the entire city is quite literally under the control and at the mercy of the Eternal Fire, meaning their rulers and their beliefs trump those of many others throughout fear or simply because of brainwashing. And also a last little note I wanted to mention was the Great Temple of the Eternal Fire, or otherwise the Grand Church of the Eternal Fire. It has a little interesting story behind it because it's built of marble and is commonly nicknamed the Grand Picket, and it lies dead in the centre of the city, and before it was even built there, it used to be an elven mansion that was extended by human settlers, so that was basically relating back to the first landings. And according to a legend, during the first arrivals, when the first colonists were visiting the abandoned town, they saw a strange glow emitting from one of the palaces. Inside, they met an individual sitting near a great bowl of fire. Upon being asked who he was, he answered, "I guard the eternal fire. As long as it will flame in this place, so long this city and your kin will endure." And then he disappeared, and this was basically the beginning of the belief of the Eternal Fire and why it is so strong inside of Novigrad. From as far as I understand it, though I may be entirely wrong, but from my understanding of what this means, it must mean that it came from Novigrad if that was when the first settlers arrived there. To sum it up pretty simply, the Eternal Fire is a very aggressive faith which fights against all abnormal beings such as non-humans, witches, and of course beasts. Occasionally, even witches, due to their mutations, aren't welcome in cities that believe in the Eternal Fire because of their religious beliefs, which is what has led to Novigrad becoming so unsafe for any that do not fall into the good books of the Eternal Fire, and that has led to the mass of witch hunts. That including the public burning and execution of their enemies en masse, and leading to the difference in opinion being nearly non-existent through fear. Now I'm just going to quickly go over the various different districts and areas inside of the city because I think it's quite important to know exactly where they all are, because it kind of helps you give a more rounded idea of the city and what the different locations are, because the actual names give a lot about the history behind it. So firstly we have a district known as the Bits, which is Novigrad's poorest district and is where a lot of the selling goes on of illegal goods and drugs, and it has its own hospital, its own inn, and basically a brothel as well now and again, and it's a bit like the slums of the city in that way, or the equivalent of what it would be if they did have one. There is also a place known as Far Corners, which is basically the largest district by land size, and it's basically the area just outside of the city walls where all the farmland is, and it's also where many of the non-humans live due to the fact that the Eternal Fire is, not so keen on them in that way. There is also the Fish Market, which is located southwest of Hierarch Square, and it's a place where various goods of many different kinds are sold, mostly fish obviously for the obvious reasons of its name, but otherwise it's a place of just trade and where a lot of merchants come and blacksmiths craft everything, and it's just a general market area. Glory Lane is another district which is located in the southern part of the city. It's the location of Vittori's workshop and also a brothel called the Rosemary and Thyme, along with a herb shop as well. Gildorf is the most influential district in the entire city and is probably one of the richest. It has the finest brothels and the bathhouse and also the morgue, as well as a lot of market stalls and many different residents from many different places around the continent. It's basically the posh area of the entire city, and it has the wealthiest merchants, and it sells all of the best equipment in that way. Because of its importance, it's also protected by the temple guards and the witch hunters, and there are also 4 entrances to the city sewers inside of it. Harbourside is essentially the docking area of the entire city where ships will come in and dock to sell their goods and to give away their wares, and to store them inside of the warehouses that are inside of the area. It has no residential areas, it has 1 or 2 inns, but otherwise overall it's mostly just for the factories or for the warehouses. Hierarch Square is one of the main squares inside of Novigrad, a place where many nobles live and is also where the executions of many mages are conducted by witch hunters. It is also a place where the bank is located along with many other market stalls as well, so it's a place where a lot of people come to sell their wares. Lace Halls is a small district within Novigrad and is located near Glory Lane, and it is basically named after the harlots that stroll along the streets. Putrid Grove is a little enclave which is inside of the district of Lace Halls, the one that I just spoke about, and it's basically ruled by the King of Beggars. And it is also a place where a lot of magic users have found sanctuary from witch hunts, which are obviously done by the witch hunters and the Temple Guard. Silverstone is another district which is a little bit poorer than the other ones, but it is basically filled with market stalls and more of a residential area. It's not nearly as crowded as the bits, but it's basically on the same level in terms of its poverty. Now, there is a lot more I could go into when it comes to all the individuals and all the rulers of the city and the actual history behind every single nook and cranny of the massive place, but to be honest, they would all really deserve their own video if I was going to go into any detail. So if you all enjoyed this and you'd like to hear more about the various different politics and people behind the city, then leave a comment down below and tell me what you'd like to see next. I know this is a much shorter video than usual, but it seemed to make more sense to have this being what it is rather than making sort of like a 20 to 30 minute long video and having all the information at once and kind of stretching it out. So I just thought I'd make it a little bit more simple and then you just get a basic idea of what's going on. And if anything, this will probably be part of a mini-series just on Novigrad alone, and I will do various different episodes now and again for any who are wanting to watch it. But otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, then please share it around, and if you want to see more, then you can obviously subscribe, but I really don't need to tell you how YouTube works, or I don't need to explain it. To be honest, I never really understood why any YouTuber sits there at the end of the videos like asking people to subscribe, because if they wanted to subscribe they would have subscribed already, right? But that's a whole other matter and nothing to do with me, so yeah. And I know I say thank you a lot at the end of these videos, and I never want it to be insincere, because I really do mean thank you if you're watching the video and if you're sharing it around, and if this is the first video you've seen, then just no matter what, thank you. And again, my Patreon is up and running now, so if any of you want to support me there a little bit, just by buying me a cup of coffee or something, then by all means the links are down below in the description. And until the next one, this has been Okayguv Bear, and you're going to have a very, very good day. Tiffinton.